Robert Harris never could have predicted that his first day in a new town would begin with a total Jeep, handcuffs on his wrists, and two overly confident cops acting like they ran the place. They thought they could humiliate anyone sporting a red cap, but there was one crucial detail they overlooked. The man they decided to target was their new boss. And now, the tables are about to turn. Robert Harris, a 47-year-old newly appointed chief of police, arrived in a quiet, small town to begin a fresh chapter in his career. Known for his no-nonsense leadership style and commitment to fairness, Robert looked forward to bringing discipline and respect to the department. Driving his black Jeep, which he considered his pride and joy, Robert pulled into the gravel lot of a local convenience store. The setting sun cast a warm amber glow over the streets, adding a sense of tranquility to the town. As he stepped out of his vehicle, Robert adjusted his red United We Stand cap, a subtle statement of his values and unwavering principles. Unknown to him, two uniformed officers leaned casually against a patrol car nearby, watching him with suspicious eyes. Their smirks hinted at trouble. Dismissing the strange vibes, Robert headed inside the store to grab a bottle of water and collect his thoughts for the tasks ahead, meeting the mayor, reviewing department protocols, and acquainting himself with the community. However, when he stepped back outside, his heart sank. His Jeep, once spotless, now bore a massive dent and a shattered windshield. The two officers stood nearby, grinning smugly, unaware they had just targeted their new boss. Inside the convenience store, Robert Harris took a moment to breathe, letting the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the faint smell of coffee calm his nerves. His mind raced with the tasks ahead: meet the mayor, review protocols, and establish himself as a fair but firm leader. With a cold bottle of water in hand, he paid the cashier, nodding politely before heading back outside. As Robert stepped into the golden light of the evening, his sense of calm shattered. His Jeep, a reliable vehicle he had driven for years, was no longer pristine. A massive dent scarred the driver's door, and the windshield displayed a jagged web of cracks. His pulse quickened. Standing beside the damaged vehicle were the two officers he'd noticed earlier, leaning against their patrol car with smug grins plastered across their faces. The taller one, whose badge read J. Sims, casually twirled a baton in his hand. Beside him, the shorter officer, identified as Marcus, held a rock that bore the unmistakable marks of collision with glass. Robert stormed toward them, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. "What the hell is this?" Sims smirked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Looks like your fancy ride had some bad luck, pal. Welcome to town." Marcus added, a wide smirk on his face. "Yeah, we figured we'd send a little message. Folks like you don't usually get a warm welcome around here." He nodded toward Robert's red United We Stand cap, his meaning clear. Robert's jaw clenched as anger bubbled to the surface. "A message? You call this a message?" "This is vandalism, and it's unacceptable." Unfazed, Sims leaned closer. "Relax, buddy. Around here, we make our own rules. Maybe you should learn them." Little did they know, they had just picked a fight with their new boss. Robert Harris stood in front of his battered Jeep, his chest tight with anger. The two officers, still smirking like mischievous bullies, seemed unfazed by his outrage. "What in the world do you think you're doing?" Robert demanded, his voice steady but brimming with fury. The taller officer, Sims, straightened up and lazily swung his baton. "Bad luck, huh? Looks like your ride didn't survive the welcoming party," he said mockingly. "Welcoming party?" Robert's voice rose. "This is vandalism. You've got no right to touch my property." Marcus S., the shorter officer, chuckled, tossing the rock in his hand like a toy. "We've got every right," he sneered. "See, around here, we don't take kindly to outsiders, especially ones with caps like that." He nodded toward Robert's United We Stand cap, his expression oozing disdain. Robert's fists clenched, but he held his ground. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice sharp. "You're out of line, completely out of line. And I'm going to make sure you both answer for this." Sims, unfazed, stepped closer, his smirk turning colder. "Is that so, boss? Maybe you should think twice before running your mouth around here. We don't play by your city rules." Before Robert could respond, Sims grabbed his arm in a swift, practiced move, twisting it behind his back. The baton clattered to the ground as Robert was shoved against the side of his Jeep. "What the hell are you doing?" Robert shouted, struggling against Sims's iron grip. Marcus moved in, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Don't worry, pal," he said with a mocking grin. "We'll give you a nice cozy spot at the station. Maybe then you'll figure out how things work around here." The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Robert's wrists as Marcus secured them tightly. His mind raced with disbelief and fury. This wasn't just a gross abuse of power, it was a calculated act of intimidation. "You're both making a huge mistake," Robert said through gritted teeth as they dragged him toward their patrol car. Sims shoved him into the back seat with unnecessary force, sneering, "Save it. You're not in charge here. And if you keep running that mouth of yours, things are going to get a whole lot worse." Marcus climbed into the passenger seat, turning to look at Robert through the metal grate. "Hope you're comfortable back there, pal. We'll make sure you get the full tour of the station." As the patrol car pulled away, Robert stared out the window, the quiet streets of the town blurring past. His wrists ached, but it was his pride and sense of justice that burned the most. The two officers laughed and joked in the front seats, their arrogance filling the confined space of the car. But Robert's anger turned into a calm resolve. "Trust me," he said quietly, his voice cutting through their chatter. "This isn't over." Little did they know they had just set themselves up for a reckoning. The patrol car jolted to life, and Robert Harris sat silently in the back seat, the handcuffs digging into his wrists. The officers in the front, Sims and Marcus, shared smug glances, clearly enjoying their display of power. The tension in the car was thick, broken only by the occasional crackle of the police radio. "So Boss," Sims sneered, glancing at Robert through the rearview mirror, dragging out the word with mocking emphasis. "How's it feel back there? Cozy enough for you?" Robert locked eyes with him in the mirror, his gaze unwavering. "You two have no idea what you've just done," he said, his voice low but filled with steel. Marcus turned halfway in his seat, his smirk widening. "Oh, is that right? Why don't you enlighten us, Chief? From where we're sitting, it looks like we just showed you the ropes." Sims chuckled, shaking his head as if Robert's warning was a joke. "Yeah, consider it an initiation. Welcome to the team," or whatever. Robert's anger burned, but he refused to lose his composure. "If you think this is how law enforcement works, you're in for a rude awakening," he said, his tone calm but cutting. Sims rolled his eyes, brushing off the comment. Big words for a guy in cuffs. Newsflash, this town runs on its own rules, and we're the ones who make them. Marcus added, "Yeah, maybe you missed the memo, but this isn't your little city job anymore. Around here, we handle things our way." Robert stared out the window, watching the quiet streets blur past. The town seemed peaceful, almost idyllic, in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding inside the car. The officer's behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it exposed a toxic culture where power was abused without accountability. Silent but resolute, Robert knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The patrol car screeched to a stop in the station's parking lot, jolting Robert Harris forward in his seat. Sims climbed out, slamming the door behind him, while Marcus yanked open the back door to haul Robert out. The smug grin on Marcus's face made it clear he still thought he was in control. "All right, buddy," Sims said, grabbing Robert's arm and pulling him roughly toward the station. "Let's get you settled in." The building was far from impressive, a tired structure with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. Inside, the buzz of conversations halted as officers turned to watch the spectacle unfolding. Robert, still handcuffed, was paraded through the lobby like a prize, with Sims and Marcus acting as if they'd just apprehended a dangerous criminal. "Booking rooms this way," Marcus said, casually motioning toward a hallway. "We'll have you processed in no time." But Robert had reached his limit. Planting his feet firmly on the scuffed linoleum floor, he refused to move another step. "I'm not going anywhere until someone explains this circus," he said sharply. "You arrested me without cause, damaged my property, and think this is a joke. Someone's going to answer for this." Before either officer could respond, a commanding voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" All eyes turned as Lieutenant Jason entered the room, his uniform pressed and his expression a mix of authority and confusion. His gaze shifted from Robert to the two officers, taking in the scene before him. "Dare to explain why you're hauling someone into my station in handcuffs without notifying me first?" Sims hesitated, his usual smugness faltering. We had a situation, sir. Thought it was best to bring him in for questioning," he stammered. Jason crossed his arms, his tone turning cold. "Questioning? For what? And why does he look like he's been dragged through a war zone?" Before the officers could stammer out an excuse, Robert spoke up, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I can answer that, Lieutenant. Your officers decided to vandalize my car, assault me, and haul me in for no reason other than their own amusement." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And since introductions seem to be necessary, I'm Robert Harris, your new chief of police." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hitting everyone at once. Sims and Marcus exchanged panicked glances, their bravado crumbling. "Wait, what's Sims?" managed, his voice cracking. Jason's eyes widened in shock, and his expression quickly shifted to anger. "You two," he barked, pointing at Sims and Marcus, "my office. Now." The officers shuffled off, their arrogance replaced by unease. Jason turned back to Robert, clearly uncomfortable. Chief, I had no idea. I'll have those cuffs removed immediately. Another officer stepped forward to unlock them. As the cuffs fell away, Robert rubbed his wrists, his expression unyielding. This isn't just about me, he said firmly. It's about setting things right for this department and this town. This stops now. Jason nodded, his tone subdued. Understood, Chief. Robert squared his shoulders and walked toward what was now his office. The day had begun with chaos, but he was ready to take control and bring order to the department. Sims and Marcus had no idea what was coming next. Robert stood tall, his mind racing with the need for immediate action. The cuffs still bit into his wrists as he turned to Jason, his voice steady but unwavering. Get these off now, he ordered, his tone commanding. Jason quickly nodded, signaling another officer to unlock the cuffs. As the cold metal fell away, Robert rubbed his wrists, his resolve strengthening with each passing second. He wasn't just a victim here, he was the new chief, and it was time to make that clear. This behavior won't be tolerated, Robert continued, his gaze sharp. These officers thought they could bully me and get away with it. But this is bigger than me, it's about restoring order and accountability to this department. The room was silent as Robert's words hung in the air. Jason, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, stepped back and nodded, acknowledging the seriousness of the moment. Robert's voice was calm but firm as he walked toward his office. I'll be taking action. This isn't over the officers who had wronged him, and everyone else in the department would soon learn that things had just changed. Robert Harris entered the conference room, his presence commanding immediate silence. Sims and Marcus sat at the table, their earlier arrogance replaced by visible unease. Robert didn't waste time. Standing at the head of the table, he fixed them with a piercing stare. Let me make one thing clear, he began, his tone calm but sharp. What you did wasn't just unprofessional, it was a disgrace to the badge. You vandalized property, harassed a civilian, and assaulted a superior officer. Whether or not you knew who I was doesn't matter. What matters is that you thought this kind of behavior was acceptable. It's not. Sims opened his mouth to protest, but Robert cut him off with a raised hand. Save it. You've embarrassed yourselves, this department, and the town you're supposed to serve. He motioned to Lieutenant Jason, who stepped forward. Hand over your badges. Effective immediately, you're both dismissed from duty. Reluctantly, the two officers removed their badges and placed them on the table, their faces burning with humiliation. Robert's gaze swept over the room. This department will change starting now. The behavior I've witnessed ends today. This isn't just about accountability, it's about restoring trust in law enforcement, and I'll make sure we get there. Later that afternoon, the mayor arrived at the station, his expression a mix of concern and regret. Extending a firm handshake to Robert Harris, he said, Chief Harris, what happened to you was unacceptable. On behalf of the town, I sincerely apologize. The mayor assured Robert of full support in his efforts to rebuild trust within the department and promised resources for reforms. As a gesture of goodwill, he also arranged for Robert's damaged Jeep to be replaced. Robert nodded, appreciating the gesture but remaining focused. This isn't just about me. It's about making this department better for everyone, he replied, resolute in his mission. As Robert Harris drove his new Jeep through the quiet streets, the day's events weighed heavily on his mind. His red United We Stand cap sat on the dashboard, a reminder of the defiance and principles that fueled him. What began as a humiliating ordeal had become a necessary wake-up call. Pulling into his driveway, Robert stepped out with a deep breath. Day one, he muttered, locking the door. His resolve was clear: the department would be reformed and integrity would be restored, no matter the challenges ahead.